Hello, it's James from XRobots.co.uk. This is part 5 of my version 2 of BB-8, which I've got just here. So most of this is 3D printed. It's got a head actuator that moves backwards and forwards and also left and right and allows the head to turn. And I've got an inertial measurement unit on that and one in the main body, which is basically a hubless wheel. And that means using both inertial measurement units I can calculate the centre of gravity and try and keep the whole thing stable despite the head moving around. So have a look at the previous 4 parts and more information on the construction, the electronics and the code, and I will be publishing all of the CAD and all of the code for free once I've tidied it up and once things look good. So it drives pretty well for now. I've actually added some more magnets since last time, so I now have 4 magnets in the head there which grip onto the body, and those grip onto the head control arm, and that makes the head be stuck on much better than it was. So I'm quite happy with that, but I do need to balance the thing up. So last time I mentioned that I added a motor in the back of it, which is for the head control arm, and that tends to make it lean this way quite a lot. So I do need to add speakers and an amp and some sounds to it, so I'm going to do that first, try and balance it up and sort the code out. Then I'm going to work on putting the sides on the ball. Okay, so I've got a pair of speakers that I've had for a while, not sure where they came from, but they've got fairly hefty magnets on, so those are fairly big. I'm going to be using this amp, which is tiny. It's 3 watts a channel and it's a stereo amp. They're actually pretty loud in a confined space at least, so I think that's going to be okay. Otherwise I'll have to find another amp or tear down a pair of active speakers like I did for my R6 Droid. And I've got one of these soundboards here, which is the Adafruit Mini Sound FX board. It's a 2 meg one, and it's the one without the audio out socket, so you just solder the wires straight onto this. And that's going to play the actual sounds from BB-8. So where am I going to get the sounds from? Well, I'm fortunate enough to own one of the Sphero BB-8s, so that's quite good. And I've got a hacksaw here, so I could get the sounds out. Though I don't actually need the hacksaw, because the sounds don't come from the Sphero, they come from the mobile app. So this is actually quite good. It's got quite a lot of BB-8 sounds, and what I can do, of course, is go to settings on the app here. Let's just find it. And go and toggle the setting there to turn off the UI sounds, and all I keep then is the Droid sounds. So if I go back in here now, hopefully we won't get any more music. We get some quite good BB-8 sounds, and if you can hear it you can record it. So yeah, okay, so what we can do, of course, is just take a jack plug and plug that into my phone, and then I can go and record that out to my laptop or whatever and use all the sounds. So I've recorded my sounds and put them on the Adafruit soundboard, and what I've done there is stuck the amp on top with sticky tape, so I've got one really compact sound unit, and obviously the speakers are wired up, and I've just got this running on one of these USB packs for now. So if I ground the pins, it should play sounds in order. So it's pretty loud. Should be pretty loud. I can see the speaker cones moving, so I think that should be good. So we just need to mount that inside. So I've made this piece, which is 2 bits of ABS bonded back to get back, and I've used a solvent weld with acetone. And these hold the speakers, so the speakers go in one either side there, and the other one in there, like so. And this plug piece on the top fits into a specific place in the platform, so that should just plug in, and that will be solvent welded in as well. And I left holes in there for mounting things at both sides. One is mounting the motor for moving the head, and the other one is obviously the speakers. So I put the speakers quite high up there, which would seem not the logical thing to do. I'm going to glue those in shortly, but I do need to leave space above the coin ring for another stack of coins to make turning better and basically put more ballast in the bottom. So I've now programmed one of my buttons to play a different BB-8 sound every time I hit it, and all that I've done on the Adafruit board is you take a pin low and you name the files in a certain way, and every time you hit that pin to ground it'll play a different sound, so it just cycles through 10 sounds. So I can do all the things now. I've got the head turning, and I can kind of do that thing where BB-8 looks round corners, which is quite good if I turn the head the right way. So he's quite quite happy to be puppeteered, but I've still got a bit of an issue with side-to-side stability. Back to front's not too bad, that's pretty well balanced now. I've got speakers in one side and the motor in the other, but this way is a bit dodgy. So short of getting some form of stability by moving the head side to side, which of course still works and has some influence, and I can't do that till I've got the sides of the ball on, I'm going to put some more coins in my coin ring by putting another stack on top, and that should help a lot with spinning on the spot as well. So just adding these sections of extra slots here for coins. I've got a big bag of change to go in, probably not going to fully populate them, but I'll put quite a few in and we'll see how it goes. Just got one more section to stick on top there. Of course it'd be much better if the whole internals of the robot rotated and the robot itself was its own flywheel against the outer ball. So obviously every time I add something in like speakers or motors, that opposes the flywheel, so the flywheel has more effort turning the robot in the opposite direction. So I have to continue with this for now, but obviously it could really do with a complete redesign. Similarly, instead of having just the head moving sideways to balance, it would be really good if all of the mass shifted sideways as well, like it does back to front to balance against the head. So you can either move all the mass forward and the head forward, or back, or any combination of, and it would be good if I could do that sideways, but obviously that would be something that we have to look at in version 3. So I fitted all of the rings and I've put a few coins in. So I've basically put 6 stacks of 10 in, and that's all I've put in, and it's already quite a lot more stable. In the last clip it did stay sort of leant over one side and wouldn't come back upright, and now it's a lot happier about that, especially if I move the head. Just with those few extra coins, it centres much better, so it's almost completely upright and I can drive this quite well under control without too many issues. Let's just try turning. Turning works slightly better, the motors are struggling a bit more. That mat is particularly grippy that it's on, so we'll try it on a smooth floor. But it feels much more controllable. And I've still got much more space for more ballast if I need. So we'll give that a drive on a smooth floor and see how it goes. So here we are, it's pretty stable now. I can throw it around quite a bit and it seems fairly happy. See that head stabilisation working, and with the extra magnets in the head it's much better as well. The flywheel, however, isn't as good as it was. I can turn, but it's not quite as responsive, and you can really hear the motors straining there, so I need to look at that. The flywheel's not particularly free running as it is, so. But generally driving is okay. It doesn't wobble sideways as much. It stays pretty stable. Which works pretty well. So there we go. So let's talk about the sides of the ball and this flywheel, which are kind of related. So let's talk about this flywheel. It's basically controlled by 2 motors that are inside here with a rubber wheel running on the inside. There's one on each side of this. But they're running on these, which are NinjaFlex rollers on 3D printed middle hubs, but they're just stuck on a bolt, there's no bearing in there. Also, this whole flywheel, now it's getting heavier of course, is resting just on these plastic brims, and that's all that's supporting it. You can see there's quite a lot of dust here, which is probably where it's starting to grind it away. So there's quite a lot of friction there. I have put a bearing in each side to stop it shifting this way, which runs against the outside, and it's got some play in it but not too much. But I really need to do something about these. Probably run the actual flywheel on bearings facing the other way. The other issue I've got is that I don't think these fit inside the ball. Looking at this, I think it sticks out too much for the contour of the ball, especially as the frame is going to be about 10mm thick. So really I need to take these off and put two bearings fitted right back inside underneath the flywheel. But we'll do the sides and see how well it fits or not. Here is my plan for the CAD for the main ball. So I've got my 6 circles there and the triangles. Obviously this frame part is on the border of the circles and the triangles, so the circles are a bit big, but there will be an entire circular panel fitted on each one, and obviously triangular panels fitted onto the others, which I think I'm going to vacuum form, but I haven't quite decided yet. Of course I've already got the barrel in the middle, so let's just drop that in. So that fits roughly there, and you can see I've offset the circles and the triangles so they're not dead on centre, and we don't get the same sort of circles coming around all the time, and we haven't got circles directly basically on the axis. So it's going to be basically, it makes it harder to see that it's only driving in one direction. The next thing I've done here is to subtract the ball from the blue sphere basically, and also put in this rim here, so we've got screw holes where these parts will screw onto the screw holes that I left in the original inside. So obviously that's pretty self-explanatory. That gives me the circles on the outside, and then obviously the panels will overlap onto the barrel and those skins will be stuck on the outside. And the next thing I've done there is to cut those up so that they can be printed, and that means dividing them into several parts. There's going to be some support material involved, but I've hopefully done it to minimise support material, and those overhangs should print mostly okay on the outside parts. Obviously these inside parts are going to need some support material once I've cut them up and printed them. Here are some of the pieces so far. So that one goes around the edge, and then these pieces all get solvent welded together, and that builds up the structure to make that whole frame on each side. So I've started labelling them with the CAD colour. So this one is blue and this one is green. So this does actually seem to fit, and it's just skims past this thing here. Let's have a closer look at that. So aligning the screw holes, you can see hopefully that there's a gap there of about 10mm. So it looks like I actually planned this properly, and I wasn't sure if I'd, when I designed these pieces, if I'd actually left space for a thicker skin. So it does look, in fact, even with a bit of play on the internal there, well, that will skim past this surface. But I'd really like to get rid of these and put in something better, as I discussed. So let's have a look at a design for that. So it's just as well I don't have to take these off, because they're actually, as well as being screwed on there, they're actually solvent welded on as well, so it would have meant sawing them off from the internal hub. So what I really want to do is put a bearing in, sort of in that position, as wide as possible apart from the other side, suspended on a bolt attached to this black thing that basically supports that flywheel. So I need to make a printed thing I can solvent weld on here that will hold an 8mm bolt or a bit of studding, and hopefully I can just support this straight on the bearing. They run pretty well on a smooth surface, so that should do hopefully, and then we'll see how well it turns. So here's my plan for the additional pieces. The blue parts here are the black parts, which have currently got the rollers, the orange rollers mounted on, and I've got these additional red parts which are going to hold a bearing the other way through that hole, and those are going to solvent weld onto the corners, so there'll be a pair on each side. So I've mapped out roughly the spacing here of the two black pieces we've got, worked out where the middle is, and worked out what angle those bearings need to sit at, so they run around the circumference of the flywheel, and it should run smoothly. So we'll get those printed and see how well they fit. Here are my parts. So I'm just putting some studding through with a bearing on one side and lock nuts there and some washers, and those parts should fit quite neatly in here. Now I've taken the orange rollers off. There's quite a lot of powdered plastic on the thread, you can see there, so those haven't been running well at all. They should just fit on the corners on each side, and then the flywheel runs round on that bearing hopefully. Right, you're all solvent welded in, all the solvent welds have gone off on both sides. So this flywheel is now suspended on those bearings, limited by the bearings at each end and obviously pushed outwards by the motors. And even just turning that by hand, it feels pretty amazing. I need to sort out these wires so they don't rub, but let's just turn this on. So that seems pretty smooth running. There's a bit of a jitter to start with, so I might need to just move. Let's see. I may just be rubbing on the wires, but it's definitely running a lot freer, and I can definitely get more mass in here now, so that should do a much better job of turning it. Okay, so I've put some more coins in the coin slot. I also found one of my motors was loose, which is what the nasty wobble was, but it's nice and tight now. And the results are pretty incredible actually, so can do all sorts of things, which is pretty cool. My side pieces are coming together, so I've got all 4 of these printed, and I've also got the top sections. None of this is fixed together yet, but approximately that goes on there, and then that goes on there. And that makes up the entire side of the ball. So I shall get that assembled, and I've left an extra large hole in one of the pieces, and that goes opposite an extra large hole in the opposite piece, so I know which way up they are and everything aligns. Right, I'm getting there. It's looking more like a ball. Just got all these parts clamped up and some tape while I make those solvent welds to stick it all together. Alright, so both my side panels, or whatever you want to call them, are stuck on. So I've got the spaces there for obviously the big rings and the triangles as well. So some of these I've shrunk out some of the frame sections to make it stronger, but I do have obviously the circles opposite each other all the way around, and I've got 6 of them, so that's pretty good. So what I've done is tuned up some of the code. So I did have this situation before where if I put the head forward, then the internal hub you can see slightly moving backwards so it doesn't roll away. And that means it stays on the spot. And the way I did that was by taking the inertial measurement unit on the head stick and subtracting that from the one on the main internal hub to work out the centre of gravity. So that works very well when it's sat still. I can turn the head as well and play all the sounds. There we go. So it can look round corners and all of those things. The problem is, of course, when it's driving, the head trying to keep stable and that angle affecting the hub causes it to do strange things. So I have to turn down the gain on all the PID loops, otherwise they fight each other and I get a really weird wobble. So what I've done is implemented a button. So when I'm static, for static puppeteering mode, I engage this sort of button that's a bit like a handbrake, although it's not actually a handbrake, because if you push the droid it still rolls along to stay stable. But essentially it means I can move the head forward and it doesn't drive away. When you want to drive, you let go of the button, so you take the handbrake off, and now if I push the head forward, it rolls in that direction, and it actually makes a pretty good job of it, just like leaning on a Segway. So as I move the head backwards and forwards there, you can see I've got a fairly smooth motion. There's still a few issues of magnetic coupling. Whoops. But essentially I get a fairly smooth ride, and I can still drive the main ball as well if I want to keep the head on the top. So if I use the other stick, I can still drive, and again it's fairly smooth now. Those two things aren't fighting each other. Or I can put the head forward a bit of both, and I can drive fairly well. And of course if I'm driving and I want to stop, so let's just lean that head forward and drive for a bit, and I want to pull up and I want to stop, I can just press that button and that should come to a better stop than it would do otherwise. So that's actually setting a set point of 0 for driving and saying now work out your centre of gravity and stay still. And of course that's quite a good mode for spinning on the spot as well, so I can spin it all around. There we go, and then take off the handbrake and off I go in this direction. So I think that's a pretty smooth stop. I think that's the best I'm going to get it. It's far better than it was before. Quite a good kind of gradual stop. Sometimes it seems to carry on, and I'm not quite sure why that is. I know that my ball isn't perfectly flat. There's some ridges in it, which do cause me some issues. But on the whole, it's feeling quite a lot more like BB-8. I feel quite happy puppeteering it, so that's feeling pretty good for now. And of course, when it's got panels on, you won't be able to see the internal hub, so you won't see the flywheel spinning, and you won't see when it's driving that there's something else inside rocking. So if you look at the head and just the body, then it's actually doing hopefully quite a good job of staying stable. And obviously when I do put that handbrake feature on and offset the head to the front, then it looks just as impossible as it did on stage at Star Wars Celebration. If I wanted to make that motion smoother and better controlled still, then I'd probably need some sort of wheel encoders on all my motors. At the moment I'm just driving more or less current into them to make them go and stop. And obviously as they slow down, the current reduces, and at some point before it gets to the bottom there isn't enough current to make that motor turn. That's kind of a dead spot. It's the same with ramping up as well. If I really wanted to remove that dead spot and have very gradual motion all the way down to 0, then I need to monitor if those motors are turning or not with a motor controller and something on the actual output shaft to see if it is turning, and then I can really control speed based on that rather than just ramping down the amount of current that's driven into the motor. So I think that's probably the smoothest driving I'm going to get for this setup just with DC motors, but it's definitely something I'd like to do in version 3 as well as some of the other things I've discussed if I actually do a version 3. There's quite a lot of improvements to make, and I think BB-8 is going to be a popular character, so it's probably going to be people who carry on trying to build BB-8 for a number of years, probably including me. So next time I'm going to be sticking panels on, hopefully made of some vacuum form material, so I don't add too much distance in the magnetic coupling, so probably less than 2mm is all I'll get away with. So next time it's sort of cosmetics and doing those things. I'm probably going to put LEDs in the outside, and as I discussed I've got space here for opening panels, so I need to somehow get some electricity essentially to the outside, power and data. So I've got some slip rings and things which I'll have to make mounts for. It's going to be quite interesting to get those on, and of course we'll hopefully paint up the head and looking at sticking the panels on that as well, so I don't have this globe with a bit of Kazakhstan by the eye. Alright, so don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more updates on this project and all my other projects. That's all for now.